Hi, beat-em-ups and brawlers is a genre we associate with the arcades, but DOS had its fair share of them too, and we'll take a look at those less known ones today. One per year and no hits. So, let's go! There's a lot that can be said about Operation Clean Streets. Yes, clean streets, and not clean streets. Yes, one and not two words. Don't ask me, because I don't know why, it's like that and it's just the way it is. Yep, I'm shamelessly using it as my own. So yeah, there's a lot that can be said about the game, most of it is not great. I mean, from the perspective of 2024, as in 1988 it was borderline okay. Barely, but it was. It's a flip-screen side-view beat-em-up, or brawler if you will, and it takes you through the crime-ridden streets of Manhattan. Well, you're there and the title stipulates that they will be cleaned, so it's just a matter of time, right? I mean, your janitorial kick and punch cleaning skills are well known, and you've thrown out more trash from local clubs last year than most of Manhattan's security guards did over their entire careers. Anyway, you play as Inspector Harry, and your mission is that simple: to seize and destroy all the drugs smuggled into Manhattan. The game is composed out of 9 locales, and all you really do is walk around beating the criminals, who are a rather wild spread of different characters, from ninjas through punks all the way to highlight kite women of the night, yep, you can thank the YouTube algorithm for that name, and anything in between. You can enter some buildings, which is a nice novelty, but neither them nor the locales you'll go to are particularly interesting, especially in the terribly contrasting CGA presentation. What's worse, your kicks and punches is what you really have, and it's not a wide range of attacks to keep the game entertaining for very long. Especially that the basic loop looks exactly like that. Beat up some baddies, collect the drugs that they've dropped, find the barrel, burn them in it and regain health in the process, and you know what that means, right? Yup, that you're constantly high from ingesting of all those fumes. And you're not really a hero, but a drug fiend beating people up to fuel your permanent high. Or, and that's as feasible explanation, I may be overanalyzing the situation and it's just game logic that's behind this odd design choice. The land of Belov is an unusual place. Not only it's filled with magic, but also lays across between 5 different periods of time, torn out of our reality, suspended in relative safety from most outside dangers. Or so it seemed, because it has been taken over by the evil and powerful wizard, Red Sabbath. What's more, he kidnapped Princess Tanya and has all sorts of terrible things planned for her. Definitely not something she'd enjoy, and definitely something she'll remember forever. So now you, playing as courageous knight, despite her laughing at you at the last royal party for wearing a pink shirt, feel that you still have to do the honorable deed and travel through all 5 periods of time bordering your land, defeat tons of enemies that you'll find in them and Red Sabbath's clones too, in hopes of finding and dealing with the real one, all to save the princess and the land of Belov. Now, it's worth mentioning that slaying thousands of wizards' minions in a fit of anger is not enough to end the nightmare. You'll have to find 7 magical talismans that will grant you additional powers. Powers needed to help you on your adventure and to put down the wizard. Interestingly enough, each of those powers works only in a particular time zone and not necessarily one you found it in. The time zones that you'll be exploring are prehistoric, medieval, present day, future Earth and an alien world. And each of them has its own unique theme, scenery, enemies and the aforementioned amulets to find and pick up. Now, it has to be noted that Nightforce is not your typical brawler / beat-em-up, as it also contains platforming elements, mainly some jumping sections, and you hardly ever face more than one enemy at once. But 8 different available moves and beautiful graphics more than make up for it, I think. All in all, while Nightforce is definitely not the best game in today's video, it's far from straight up a bad one and can easily be enjoyed if you like the kind of the loop that it offers. Wild Streets. Now this one's going to be truly wild, believe me, and not in a good way. But let's start at the beginning. Wild Streets is a side-scrolling brawler taking place in New York. And by 1998, let me tell you, the city was in ruin. It looked like a war zone taken over by various gangs and lowlifes, with people living in constant fear and danger. I mean, sure, very slow agencies tried to tackle them and reclaim the city, but it's been years and no one managed to make a noticeable progress. I wasn't entirely honest with you initially, half of the city is in total peace, it's clean, there are nice houses there, and all the amenities operate perfectly and are freely available. The gimmick is that it's only populated by the biggest and most dangerous drug and crime lords, as they've cut themselves off from the poor that live in the poverty in the other part of NYC. The situation is dire and there seems to be nothing that could be done about it. Enter CIA. Yes, CIA, the one that's not supposed to operate within the continental US, but seems to be the only org capable of doing anything about it. Under the lead of the so-called boss, they began cleansing the city, and finally, after years of crime, some progress was made and parts of the city were freed. Now, this couldn't fly in the world's capital of crime, and the crime lords were furious. So in retaliation, they've devised their own plan and put it to life, by kidnapping the mastermind behind it all, the boss. They aim to torture him until he gives up the names of all the key operatives so that they could be neutralized before they even set foot in the city. Once again, when all else fails and we have a problem, and if no one else can help, and if we can find you, maybe we can hire you to save the day. I wonder if anyone will get that reference. Anyway, the game starts with you being dropped in the middle of the city from a chopper, with nothing but your trusty 357 Magnum, your Panther, and your Law and Justice, so a kick and punch respectively. Yup, you've nicknamed them, and that's how cool you are. These are perhaps not the widest of armaments, especially that there's no special attacks in Wild Streets, but they will have to last you. All to save the boss before it's too late. The game comprises of you going through different parts of the city and laying said Law and Justice to hundreds if not thousands of goons and their leaders, which you will do, no doubt in flying colors, mainly red, but that's a color too. And when you finally get to the boss and free him, you'll have to escort him back to safety, protecting him from another wave of fresh bodies. I mean, when they attack, they're not bodies yet, but you're there and you're angry, so it's inevitable, I feel. One thing I think that's worth mentioning is that you should try to hold on to your few bullets for as long as you can, focusing on your uncanny martial arts skills, as the bullets may come in handy when tackling some of those really difficult bosses. While Wild Streets graphics are not bad for 1990 and the Panther is a very nice touch, both graphically and also because you decided to take your cute cat with you on a mission, the gameplay overall is rather flat and repeatable, and gets boring fast. Similarly looking locations, blunt and overly simple combat system are the culprits. And even if it's worth experiencing once, it's not a game you'll be replaying anytime soon, if ever. It's criminal how little known and underappreciated Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles The Manhattan Missions is. Despite the naming similarities to other Turtles games, to my knowledge it was a DOS exclusive and a game that definitely deserved much more from the potential audience than it received. If I had to guess the reason, I'd say it must have been the dissociation of DOS as a gaming platform from brawlers as a genre, as they were something we thought of the most when talking about consoles. But that's just a guess, and there's no research behind it at all, so take it with a pinch, or better yet, a handful of salt. Manhattan Missions is not your typical beat-em-up, but similarly to Night Force, a mix with a platformer, and one akin to Prince of Persia no less. So you have to switch between the movement and combat stances. Anyway, Shredder devised an evil plan, and it's so smart, so nefarious and well thought out that he will easily take over the control of New York within 48 hours, if you won't stop him, that is. The game is composed out of 16 rather large levels that will be both a challenge to explore and to beat. Bodies, that is, beat all the bodies in them. It's not a simple left to right and vice versa affair, however, as you'll be entering numerous doorways, windows, sewer tunnels, climb ladders and even locate items necessary to unlock the pathways for progress. Backtracking is definitely something to get used to in this one. Each of the turtles has its own iconic weapon and fighting style, and even features directional blocking performed with a space and an arrow key, which was something not seen often in brawlers in 1991. What's more, each of the turtles is described by stats of strength, speed and energy, and they increase as you fight more. Furthermore, when turtles reach a certain level of strength, they unlock additional attacks, which is just hella cool given that your everyday beat-em-ups rarely had anything making you feel as you were improving other than the exchangeable weapons, which given the source material is naturally not the case here. The most unique and unusual thing about Manhattan Missions, however, is that you have 48 hours to complete it. And not fictional 48 hours, but 48 hours of real life time. Seems like a lot until you understand how it works. Well, it's really 48 hours and you can take as much to beat the game, with it counting down by a little every time you launch it. If your turtles get seriously wounded, cause yeah, you can play it in 2-player multiplayer too, you can have them rest between the levels. And that requires you to leave the turtles to quote-unquote rest for X hours. So, while it's sped up until they recover the HP, set number of hours is subtracted from your counter. It's something I've not seen in any other game ever, and a mechanic definitely worth mentioning. Gameplay-wise, Manhattan Missions is pretty fun and worth experiencing, and not only when you're a fan of a genre or Ninja Turtles. Deathbringer is a side view action-adventure beat-em-up mixture. The League of Wizards, awesome name I must add, so a group of evil wizards forged a magical sword by imbuing a demon's soul to it. they named it the Deathbringer, which is even better name than that of their small group, and they aim to use it to kill Karn the Barbarian, our protagonist. He, however, takes the sword for himself and plans to use it against its creators. The sword holding the demon's soul requires to be constantly fed, for the lack of a better word, to hold the demon content and captive within it. So, on your quest to find and kill all the evil wizards, you'll need to kill monsters to keep the sword safe to use and appropriately powerful. Deathbringer is composed out of 30 non-linear side-scrolling levels in which you unusually start in the very middle of and can move both left and right freely and progress in a chosen direction. Defeating enemies and getting to the end allows Karn to fight the boss guarding the next stage. Saying that there's 30 levels is a bit of a misdirection, as they are all interconnected in multiple spots, letting you freely move between them, provided you have access, that is. Overall, there's apparently over 600 unique screens in the game, and that kind of sizing in a game different than top-down RPG means nothing to me, and I cannot fathom how big it really is. Is it single screens or singular side-scrolling sections? I don't know. Do you? It's big. Whatever. It would have been much better measured in apples. I mean, if they said for instance that the world was 25,000 by 25,000 apples, I would have instantly know what to expect. But I suppose back then, in 1992, Smurf mathematics was not as widespread as it is today. Anyway, there's no literal time limit to how long you have to complete the game, other than having to kill monsters and refill the sword. Cause if at any point the sword fill meter would empty, Karn would die. Deathbringer was originally developed for Amiga and on the Amiga, and that's why it may look like something familiar to you if you had the system before, and also carry that Amiga-like graphical design. That's hard to describe, but instantly recognizable when you see it. Interestingly enough, one more thing transferred successfully from the Amiga to PC during game porting, and looks stunning for the time too, and its 36-level parallax scrolling background, which is just out of this world. It was achieved using wedges instead of squares as tiles for it. It may not be as smooth on PC as it is on Commodore's Machine Wonder, but it looks jaw-dropping for the time. Arguably, Deathbringer's gameplay loop is not for everyone, but if you're such a person, you'll have a lot of fun with it. If I would have told you that PNGT Special is a sequel to PNGT, then I wouldn't have told you anything, at least nothing useful. Why? Because neither of the titles were popular or widespread in the West when they originally released. They are Korean cartoon-like side-view brawlers / beat-em-ups. You play as either of the titular protagonists, so either unfortunately named P, or not as unfortunate but still odd GT, and you control these anthropomorphic animals, defeating any and all enemies that you come across. These enemies for the most part are either animals or anything it seems that came to devs' minds, to the point that it looks as if they were sitting at the table brainstorming, noting all the ideas down, regardless how out there or stupid they might have been, and not throwing any of them away, just gathering them up and adding to the same pile that eventually ended up in the game. So while you'll fight eagles and crocodiles, so thematically fitting animals among others, you'll also face stone elementals big and small, cakes, crackers or robots, not to mention a whole slew of other oddities. And yes, when I say cakes and crackers, I mean those that you would have normally devoured at home watching something silly but light and fun on Netflix. All these enemies, same as our duo, have their own regular and special moves and are rather nicely looking and animated. Generally speaking, PNGT Special is a pretty fun, even if not great side-scrolling brawler that's as enjoyable played alone as it is with a friend. Naturally, in a standard for the genre manner, you'll get to find and pick up various health refilling items along the way, and most levels end with a boss fight. While PNGT Special may lack the staying power of giants of the genre like Final Fight or Cadillacs and Dinosaurs for instance, for a rather obscure game, it's a gem and one worth checking out. Sounds and graphics, as with most games coming from Korea in the mid-90s, are pretty darn good, and arcade-like in their quality. So if you like beat-em-ups, this one's definitely worth a look, especially that it has that arcade Asterix and Obelix brawler type of a vibe, going for comedic and fun rather than serious gameplay. Darkside Story tells a tale of a young Jedi who, after accidentally killing his mentor during training, tastes the sweet flavor of his emerging power and becomes engrossed with the endless possibilities offered only by the dark side. He feels the force coursing through his veins and craving to emerge. No, wait, this is not the dark side I was looking for. Pity though, as it could have been something epic. It doesn't mean, however, that this Darkside Story is worse, it's just different. And it's a South Korean side-scrolling beat-em-up with some superficial adventuring elements. Soo-hee is a daughter of renowned and successful dentist Dr. Oh Sang-hyun, and her, along with both of her parents, live together in the suburbs of a sprawling metropolis in relative peace and happiness. Or so they thought. As one of those seemingly normal days, Dr. Oh Sang-hyun disappeared without a trace, only to become a permanent feature on milk cartons and lampposts posters. Being the tough girl that she is, Soo-hee must now venture through the city and its dark underbelly, seeking both answers and her father. For the most part, Darkside Story is a typical side-view beat-em-up in which you go from one area to another, defeating countless baddies, sometimes with a punch, sometimes with a kick, and sometimes with a terrible joke or bad pun. But you can also wander around the city, entering buildings and conversing with their inhabitants, all to uncover the story behind it all. When you do, the viewpoint changes from a typical for the brawlers side view to something more resembling a top-down Japanese role-playing, with caricature versions of all characters looking cute as hell. You know, short bulky body, big head, the whole shebang. Anyway, it's there, it's important, but it's the kicking and punching that we like the most about those types of games. And as those beat-em-ups go, Darkside Story is surprisingly fun. Soo-hee has a nice set of basic moves, she can juggle enemies a bit when hitting them in the air multiple times in a row, and the fighting overall feels very competent and well designed. The enemies, while not represented by the biggest sprites you've seen, are really nice and interestingly drawn, definitely feeling more as if they came from a modern indie game rather than 1990s beat-em up, which is tad surprising but also welcome fresh look for the game. There are naturally HP restoring items scattered around the stages, and they're, in respect to the best traditions of the genre, hidden in and around roadside objects, like under the trash cans for instance. I was always baffled by this mechanic, as I could never understand eating from under the trash can, but I suppose a person's life can have its ups and downs, and perhaps at times one may have no choice. Well, it's sad thought perhaps, and naturally it would be best if there was no hunger in the world, but that's hardly anything within my control. So, coming back to our game. It's really fun, pick it up if you get a chance, it's worth it. Cyberlaw, aka Cyber Police, is an excellent title for a Final Fight, Mortal Kombat and Rise of the Robots all rolled into one, in a mix like no other, and for better or worse. Simply put, it's a futuristic, extremely brutal side-scrolling beat-em-up, more brutal than the infamous Franco the Crazy Revenge, which, while well known for its gallons of blood spilling with each screen, sadly didn't make the cut to appear in this video. Anyway, the evil nefarious Scorpion gang has taken over the city and they run rampant, causing chaos and terrorizing the citizens. Well, there's more of that terrorizing than running really, they're a rather slow and brutal bunch. It's up to you, playing one of the titular Cyber Police agents, to put the stop to their reign. To do so, you will traverse through 6 stages, defeating hundreds of Scorpion gang's goons, and finally their evil leader, Jemiah. Yes, Jemiah and not Jeremiah, whatever. Each of the characters that you can pick for the mission is described by different stats, and they represent the typical trio for the genre. So one's fast but weak, the other's slow but strong, and the last sits somewhere in between. Cyberlaw can be played in single player and also cooperative and survival multiplayer modes. And while the first two are your typical beginning to an end gameplay for 1 or 2 players respectively, the third puts you in a test trial to see how many enemy attacks you can survive before failing. It's a breath of fresh air for the genre, though arguably it would work better in a more polished game. Other than having to play as robots, the most obvious selling point of Cyberlaw is that it features a lot of blood. And by a lot, I really mean a lot. Every punch, kick or weapon used against the bodies has them spilled by the bucket. And it's not unusual at all to complete the stage or a part of it with a floor completely covered in bodies and red. But don't let the goriness fool you, while undoubtedly oddly feeling when played, Cyberlaw is actually pretty fun. Perhaps not as good as the giants of the genre are, but definitely worth a playthrough every now and then, even if the enemies repeat more than I'd like them to. The sounds are what you'd expect them to be in a fighter, so all punches and kicks are appropriately meaty, but nothing above the genre average, and the graphics are high-res. And while because of it they feature considerably more detail than the older games do, I kinda prefer the classic arcade pixel-perfect ones more. Games like Alien vs Predator or Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, they just look better to me. Alright, let me start by saying that I've no clue how to approach the title of this game, and it's the second time that I'm covering it. Eongeo? I don't know, man. It's something I will never wrap my head around, it seems. I'm gonna call it EJ, and you'll pretend that you know what I'm talking about and we'll be all set. Alright? Good. So, EJ is a Korean side-scrolling beat-em-up and another excellent release from the country. I've been covering quite a few Korean games recently, but they're the easy pick, you know. Many of them never released in the West or did in a limited manner or even years later after they originally came out. and EJ is no different. It's a beat 'em up nearly no one heard about, so an excellent pick for a B-lister to compare them to the best of the genre on DOS. It's based on a comic book by Myung Jin Lee and tells a tale of a rebellious teenager, Namgung Gan. Not many people know this, but Namgung Gan means a friend of an ostrich in Latin. Don't fact check that, don't waste your time, trust me, I wouldn't lie like that, now would I? So, one of those days Namgung decided to forget his violent past and start over, to turn the page and start with a blank slate, so to speak. And as he's about to go to his school, full of hopes for the new day, for his new life, he is distracted by a beautiful girl. You know, friend of an ostrich or not, he couldn't have resisted laying his eyes on her. But little did he know, it was all a ploy, and almost immediately after he realized that his wallet was stolen. Without giving it any thought, Namgung reverts to his old angry self that he so wanted to leave behind and sets off after the thief just to find himself facing a dangerous criminal organization. Now, how much money Namgung had, or why would organized crime syndicate want teenagers' wallet in the first place, are questions we'll never get the answers to. But it's probably for the best, cause if we did, we wouldn't have this pretty cool game. EJ's gameplay is similar to any other standard brawler you saw in the arcades, and I gotta say that at least presentation-wise, it's actually on a comparable level to most of arcade hits. In terms of gameplay, it builds a little on the tried and tested walk right and kick the shit out of everything formula by adding some superficial and yet very refreshing RPG elements. So, by delivering his revenge for the theft in the series of consecutive punches to the jaw and kicks to the nuts, mixed with an occasional roundhouse kick, Namgung collects experience points which then he can later on spend on learning new moves or upgrading his health, attack power or speed. It's a very novel concept and it works great, constantly giving you something to aim for other than the aforementioned wallet that somehow managed to near instantly move from the hands of a lowly street thief straight to the boss of a whole underworld. Game logic. EJ is definitely a gem among most B-listers and a game rivaling AAA stuff in everything, from presentation to gameplay. Make sure to check it out. I think it's pretty obvious by now that all the best and little known DOS beat-em-ups came from Korea, and even if not all, then most. What's more, they were usually mixing in interesting additional mechanics to stay fresh all throughout and provide more compelling gameplay than their arcade or western counterparts did. And the Soul is no different. Evil powerful sorcerer slash half-tiger, a were-tiger if you will, is terrorizing the kingdom of Baekje, and your group of 5 brave battle mages vows to deal with him, his possessed armies and free the kingdom from under his rule, possibly the world. The Soul can be played by 1 or 2 players and features 5 unique characters to pick between, each of them having their own strengths, weaknesses, special and magic attacks. As you plow through a whole manner of enemies, human, demonic and otherworldly alike, leaving them bruised, beaten, dead, sometimes all free, you'll collect so-called level up points, which then can be distributed between the levels into health, strength, intelligence and your hero's 5 different magical skills. The Soul's most unique feature, however, is its non-linearity, meaning that after completing many of the stages, you'll be given a choice of multiple destinations, effectively allowing you to craft your own path through the adventure. And since on each playthrough you're given a random set of stages to pick from, the replayability for this one is quite high, and hardly ever do games play out the same. What's unusual about the Soul is that you only get 1 life, and that's it, kinda like you do in real life. If you die, or well, get killed actually, that's it. It's game over and you have to start from the first stage. But to counter that and the difficulty, the devs offered something else not seen in the arcades, namely save slots. 4 of them in fact. So while not perfect, it's a solution. Graphics and sounds of this one are excellent, and no wonder as it released in 1998, long after DOS's heyday, so it had to look good to spark any interest in potential buyers. Whether it did overall, it's hard to tell, it definitely didn't in the West, but we were already long on the Windows bandwagon and appreciating the new possibilities that the system offered for gaming. All that said, the Soul is stellar, and if you're in the market for a fun and rarely talked about beat-em up that features unique take on the genre, it's definitely one to seek out and try. So, do you think that brawling B-listers are as good as the biggest hits are? I think that some definitely are, especially those from Korea, but overall, DOS was not a platform that had this in abundance, so the choices for some years were quite limited. What do you think though? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below, and maybe share it too, it helps more than you know. If you didn't, then don't naturally. It was fun talking to you as usual, and I'll see you, or more accurately, talk to you very soon.